Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Development Discourse. My name is Patrick Okigbo, founder Nextier. Nextier is a public policy advisory firm. We're focused on solving Africa's complex problems. Development Discourse is our platform for unpacking many of these issues that ail the continent. Today, we're going to be discussing the trouble with Nigeria. You see, Professor Achebe gifted a lot of things to the world. You know, most of his books, Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God. And my guest today is a keen, ardent follower of Achebe. He peppers many of his discussions with quotes from many of these books. I think his favorite, maybe Arrows of God. But today, the book we're discussing, or we're going to use as our jump-off point, is a small pamphlet, The Trouble with Nigeria, where Achebe really gifts to Nigeria an analysis of what is at the root of our challenges. And that will be our jump-off point. But just to a quick introduction of my guest, he was a Minister of Aviation under President Jonathan. He was Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps under President Obasanjo. He holds several degrees, a master's from George Mason, another certificate in marine and port administration from a university in Singapore. He has a certificate as well from Oxford University, a bachelor's from my alma mater, University of Nigeria and Enugu campus. But what I find most fascinating about his academic journey is that after leaving office as Minister of Aviation, he decided to go back and get a bachelor's degree in law from Bayes University. And maybe a few weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, he finished his exams in the Nigerian Law School and will soon become a lawyer, you know, to that extent. So I find that quite fascinating. And maybe in the course of our conversation, he'll tell us if this is the end of his academic journey or if he's going to take on a PhD. Osita Chidoka, welcome.
Thank you very much, Patrick. My pleasure to be here. Good.
Excellent. And so let's go back to The Trouble with Nigeria. I mean, it was published by Fourth Dimension Publishers. I know your relationship with Ato Nwankwo, you know, who I had the pleasure of meeting once in your company. I wonder if you ever met Achebe in your dealings, especially as an Enugu boy. Did you ever run into Achebe?
Oh, yes. I went with Ato Nwankwo to Onitsha Bridge to wait for Chinua the first time he came to Nigeria after many years of sojourn in the US after his accident. And we met him at the Niger Bridge with Ato Nwankwo, escorted him to Ogidi, and then went back to Enugu. Second time was his 70th birthday with Chief Ojo Made, where we went for his 70th birthday at Bard College, where he was teaching at that time. The Iroko on the Eagle was the theme.
Yes.
And I had the rare pleasure of meeting him more closely and also meeting the world's greatest writers. Nadine Kodima was there, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Wole Soyinka, name them, all the Africans of the African Writers series, and then American writers, what's her name, the Black woman who wrote Sula.
Yes.
So, yes, Sula, I've forgotten her name now, but she was there. And we had an interesting 2 days at the Bard College, just going through Chinua's literature and all of that. Interestingly, Ato Nwankwo made me buy a land in Emene Enugu. The land was allocated to Chinua Achebe, and he felt I would like to have that land since it was up for sale. So that's my interactions with Chinua in person and over time. I was so happy I met him before he eventually passed on. And I was one of those, him and the family gave the right to bring Arrow of God and Things Fall Apart on stage without paying anything to the company in London who has the rights. So they granted me free rights to displaying Arrow of God and Things Fall Apart.
This is totally out of context of what we want to discuss, but since I have you, what do you find most amazing about Arrow of God? Because you keep going back to it.
Yes, it tells the story of leadership, of hubris, and of something, I won't reveal that now, but something I'm writing about when to stop, how people have to learn when to stop. I'm sure that, using a more contemporary example, if Nasrallah of Hezbollah and Sinwar of Hamas had known that this war with Israel will go this way, I'm sure they wouldn't have done October 7. October 7 was an example of when they thought that 2006 would be replicated with Hezbollah and Israel in a war that Israel couldn't win, and Israel backed out. But since 2006, Israel had retooled, penetrated the organizations, had information, had even bombed, planted bombs in their pagers and walkie-talkies. That's how far they had penetrated the organization. If the organization had known that, I'm sure they wouldn't have done October 7. So sometimes in life, we need to know when to stop. So Arrow of God tells the story of Ezolo not knowing when to stop. Even though he was angry with his people, even though he was a wise man, but he didn't know when to stop. And that again is the trouble with Nigeria. When leaders don't know when to stop, when to say pull back and review the strategy and think about the wider goal and the bigger picture. But hubris is something that always plagues us.
And this is probably a good place to segue into, the main core of our conversation today, which is the trouble with Nigeria and what we can do about it. In that small pamphlet by the same title, The Trouble with Nigeria, Achebe starts with that opening sentence that the trouble with Nigeria is, simply and squarely a failure of leadership. I like how he encapsulates it in one sentence, but you and I know that life does not come fully packaged that way.
Yes.
Is that a good summation of our problem? And if yes, how? If no, what are the other ramifications that simple, clean, beautiful sentence may have missed out?
So it's I think it was a strong simplification of the problem. But Chinua arguments are quite valid if you read through the book.
Yeah.
He questions many things about us as a nation. So for instance, yesterday, I used it at a conference where I spoke. I said, people say we should talk about reorientation of our national values. I said, we can't have national values if we don't define what is the meaning and purpose of Nigeria. So we have a nation, a multi-ethnic nation, a multi-religious nation. To what end? To share revenue allocation every month? To zone offices and distribute it so that my people, your people can get? That in itself is a recipe for failure. A good friend of mine told me what a Lebanese told him, that Nigeria is where Lebanon was when they were trying all this quota system. One Christian, one Muslim, one Shia, one Sunni, one Maronite Christian, one this. And today, Lebanon is ungovernable. It's an ungoverned space because it was a gradual deterioration. So a nation must have purpose. And Chinua said, why did we choose unity and faith as our national motto? Because unity is not a good in itself. You can be united to rob a bank, which is a bad thing. And you can be united to build a hospital, which is a good thing. Why can't we have concepts that are not available for dual purposes? Because when we talk about justice, there is no other way to use justice. So I think that his book, very small book, but really raises the right questions about it. Now, the solution that is purely the problem of leadership is one of the issues. We haven't had an enlightened leadership that looks at Nigeria and says, where do we want to go? Who are we? Why do we even have this nation, for heaven's sake? What is our story? Because the Americans founded their story: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The French said fraternité, égalité. brotherhood. They said it. The South Africans talk about Ubuntu. So what is the idea of Nigeria? It can be for unity and progress. United for what purpose? Progress to where? It can be for faith, unity and faith. Faith in what? Because you can have faith in God, which can be a good thing if you are religious. You can also have faith in your juju, which is in your room. And if you are not a juju maker, then that's not a good faith. You can even have faith in things that are inanimate or animate. So what is the faith for? So it goes back that the trouble with Nigeria is the lack of that thinking, which you may ascribe to leadership. But
Okay.
it's a critical part.
How is it that even after 60 odd years, we're not able to really come up with this unifying ethos as a nation? How is it that if Chinua told us decades ago that our problem is leadership, how is it that we haven't been able to attack and deal with that problem? Indeed, how did this failure of leadership become a thing in the first place?
So again, I come back to the concept of what is the purpose of a nation? Because you see, if you do not define the purpose and mission of a nation, then anybody can be a leader. But if you define the purpose and meaning, then certain kinds of people will become leaders.
Okay.
And then the institutions will be built around protecting and deepening that purpose and mission. But if the mission, and this is where I said that Nigeria's history is a history of romanticization of the past, of a failed past. 1960 to 1966 was not a successful period. That constitution of 1963 was not successful. It led us to a civil war. It created problems. It created the Western region problem. It is in correcting the Western region problem of declaring state of emergency that the 1979 Constitution now says, and 1999 repeated it, no other way to rule Nigeria except as prescribed by this Constitution. So when Obasanjo appointed sole administrator for Plateau State, it was wrong. Our Constitution has no room for for suspending elected rulers. So we have no such rule. So the idea that we are a work in progress that we need to define. So let me start by being a little practical. In 1960 to 64, we created one region, Midwestern region. So the people in the Western region, those of them senior officers, they are left to the Midwest. Midwest had a lot of human capital. So they moved to Benin to start a government. And we had Achebe as premier. But by fast track to 1967, Gowon moved us to 12 states. So Biafra was at war, but meanwhile, the 12 states took hold in the other places. So people that were not yet trained in the bureaucracy, that didn't yet quite have no reason, went home to their states to become permanent secretaries, directors, when they should have been assistant directors in Kaduna or in Enugu or in Ibadan. So now we dissembled to 12. And then the military after the war decided to bring this revenue allocation system that funneled cash to these 12 states without a concomitant need for revenue from the states. So the capacity to develop revenue, the institutions were now built around distribution. So from 1970 till date, our states are built around distribution of resource, not accumulation of resource, not the generation of resource. When we went to 19, 21, and then 36, you can imagine what has happened to the manpower recruitment for 36 states and 774 local governments. So when we talk about Nigeria failing because of leadership, we haven't also looked at what I call the structural problems that has weakened capacity. Then the second one is what I call the post-Civil War consensus. Let us create a Nigeria where no part can withdraw from Nigeria or can levy war against Nigeria. So there was a calculated effort to weaken the states so that the federal government can be strong enough, the Leviathan, to hold everybody in check. Therefore, if you generate power, we transfer it all to Osogbo before we share it to the rest of the country. If we have minerals, the federal government drills it for all of us and shares the revenue. So as the federal government grew in capacity, it continued to widen its capacity that the states. So now you go to every state, they say, we need a federal university because the federal government is usually the biggest employer in every state. But there has been no effort for the states, even the rich states of Rivers, Delta, Akwa Ibom. If you notice, they can build Lagos, minus Lagos. Lagos has been able to build some local capacity. They've been able to, because of the opposition they played 1999 to 2000 and till date, till 2015, they managed to build a certain capacity. So if you look at the other states, Delta State, with 60,000 civil servants in Delta State. And so they can't even think about paying higher wages or attracting higher quality people because the state is a distributional state and not a development state. So I have itemized two problems. One is the state creation, with the impact it has had on manpower. The second one is what I call the post-Civil War consensus. That consensus is what is still holding sway. So now that we have found ourselves in this bind, and I will go on with others as we progress in the conversation, what I think are the structural problems that has made Nigeria the way it is today.
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper, right? I understand at the creation, at independence, we had a finite pool of talented people. Then we start the state creation journey, and we keep, breaking apart that unit and sending them to the smaller states and regions that we've created. And it could have affected the skill level and competence, etc. But let's fast forward to, later, say 2007, when we have seen these things happen, and you get someone like yourself, who well-trained, worldly, dynamic, young, because you were really young when you went to, road safety, and you start that process of reforming the Nigerian road safety, which led to, quite visible, significant improvements, awards won, et cetera, international recognition, etc. Now, fast forward to where we are today. The road safety is not quite what it used to be.
Yes.
Isn't that a direct failure on your part, right? Because you should know that as you put in place these reforms, as you try to set up the institution, that you should also put up those guardrails to ensure that it sustains. So it's one thing to look at the past and say we couldn't build those skills, but in more contemporary times, you've done it, you went there, but it's not where it should be today. How do you explain that to help us understand why Nigeria is the way it is today?
So I will give you two examples of efforts to institutionalize reforms. The first one is something we call the excess crude account. It was created, accepted by everybody when Obasanjo was in power. It was initially resisted by the states. He got them teamed up, and we created the excess crude account, and it was signed into law that we will keep these monies and then we will distribute during the rainy day. So during Yar'Adua's time, we went there and drew down some money. By President Jonathan, we had drawn it all down. So the 1 billion that was remaining, we used it to seed the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Correct.
From the time we started the Sovereign Wealth Fund to today, have there been any payments by the national and subnational governments to increase the wealth fund, till date? So despite making the laws, the distributional nature of the Nigerian state does not create the incentive to sustain those type of reforms. Let's take another one. We paid our debts and our balance sheets cleaned up, and we were able to take big ticket items. What has happened to us today? From 2015 to date, we are now the second largest debtor in the world. Again, we are worse than where we were when we paid off the debt. With benefit of hindsight, should we have paid off the debt? The answer is possibly no. We should have spent the $18 billion building power stations, infrastructure, and still be owing if we knew that this was going to be the case. So Obasanjo was an example of a successful leader who engineered growth and changes, but didn't have the sufficient time to talk about national culture and vision. So 8 years does not quite allow. Many people in their 4 years are struggling for visible, tangible effects to get re-elected. And then after that, you are almost battling to wind down. So you keep doing projects to have your name all over the plot. So thinking about the more fundamental issues about the nature and character of the Nigerian state. The third one I like to give is an example that I don't know what informed it, but that example is the example of a subnational sovereign fund called the Cross River State Savings Fund or something. I can't remember the name. Donald Duke started it, and it was agreed that every month they will put 50 million into this fund. They will use it to buy stock, treasury bills, and invest and grow. It was even so made that traditional rulers were required to sign off if you want to change the law. The State House of Assembly, you need 2/3 majority. This, that. After all that was done, the next government came and just stopped paying any money, spent the one in that one, and moved on. Nobody in Nigeria has remembered that there was a state who had a plan for a sovereign, for a wealth fund.
So what could have been done differently? What could Donald have done differently? What could you have done differently, mindful of the way our political economy is set up, right? Mindful of all these issues that, benefit of hindsight, how could you have ensured that that bureaucracy that started evolving, at the road safety, that it could have sustained, 10, 20 years later, so we become a very efficient, well-run bureaucracy?
In the case of federal road safety, I think we have even had more successes with it, in terms of that most of the things I put in place are still there. In terms of people still do computer-based testing for promotion. There's proper promotion examinations. I wrote the story about 5 of my different staffs emerging as deputy corps marshals, because in a competitive situation, they will win. So in that competitive situation, they won, one from every zone. They were all 5 people who have worked with me. So no matter, unless you jettison that process, because we altered the DNA of FRSC by bringing in ISO 9001 and making it part of the civil service rules. So we put it in the conditions of service. So now FRSC officers can actually challenge any process that is put in place that doesn't go well with them. But beyond processes and things is a far more serious issue about vision, about what is the purpose of this organization and how do we continue to achieve its goals. So my goal was that it was going to transition to a regulatory organization, working with state motor vehicle departments to handle, the states will handle enforcement on their state roads, driver's license, number plates, and the centralized data is together with FRSC. So there will be Last Mile Lagos, Trace in Ogun, Anambra State Traffic Service, Enugu, and all of the 36 states with their motor vehicle administration, and FRSC managing the federal highways and regulating these other bodies under a single policy. Doing that will require substantial political capacity to get and I got it approved by the National Economic Council, the state governors and the vice president as chairman. I got it through to National Assembly, even the plan to amend FRSC law to give us that regulatory power and to unbundle what was coupled in FRSC, because Nigerian lawmaking is always about establishment without purpose. So I tried to reframe the law to set our national goals for road safety, and then have an agency called the Federal Road Safety Commission, and then compel it and now give it the role to manage states, to coordinate states in providing, because there is no way a central agency in Abuja can man the roads in Obosi, in Umpo, in Ikotepene, in Yangoji, it was going to continue to grow into a humongous bureaucracy. Like the Nigerian police, it has continued to grow without end. So we needed to rethink that image. Now, again, it brings us back to the fundamental issue. we need to rethink our distributional state
Mm-hmm.
into a development state. We need to walk away from the 1970 post-Civil War consensus. And we need to rethink and reimagine the idea of Nigeria so that our institutions will be incentivized.
We'll come to that point. We'll come to that point because I think there's something ongoing in Nigeria today that could, provide us an opportunity to explore those issues. But I want to stay on politics for a little bit.
Yes.
You were, this last week, you've kind of trended that you officially left the PDP. And in the announcement I saw, you mentioned there that you were one of the youngest people involved at the formation of that party, and that you decided to leave. Isn't that an acknowledgement of failure in some sense? The PDP was said to be the party that would rule for 100 years, and it lost, in 2015 and completely decimated, that it couldn't even muster an effective opposition. What is it about the formation and management of that political organization that made it difficult for it to come up with some of these ethos that you've talked about? Why the organization? What does it stand for? What does it mean for Nigeria? And why is it that just losing one election got it to disintegrate? If you could shed some light on that.
So the first light I will shed on it is that the formation of PDP wasn't a movement that evolved from an ideological struggle. But even that, I'm looking at the ANC and I can't recognize the ANC anymore in South Africa. It has got soft from ruling. So PDP as a ruling party, as a party that is now in office, that was in office at the time, did not seem to have in itself, was not a party that had any history anyway of existing pre-government. So it was formed and it went into government. And then there was a president and there were directives from the head. So the sub-units of the party did not develop. Mm-hmm. They were just waiting for Abuja to say what is to be done, and they do it. So now, when we lost power in 2015, it then happened that a committee of governors now had to run a party. So with no charismatic figure on top and nobody with a clear view of the party, we now found a situation where each governor was now, what do you call them now, fighting for their own fiefdom. So there was no central idea. Everybody was contributing their own to make sure that the party protects them in their state. So by the end of 2019, end of 2023, PDP had become an unrecognized entity. It had nothing in its central authority that had the kind of chairman with the vision and capacity to drive an opposition party. It couldn't metamorphose into an opposition party. It continued to live in a delusional state of grandeur that it was just waiting to take power. So doing the work of opposition, providing the human capital, the type of people that will lead the party for opposition, the governors were incapable of that. The governors all thought about bringing people that will help to sustain their powers in the state. So ultimately, it wasn't a matter of time before PDP now became a party without, a soul and without clear objectives. So because everybody thought of it as a part of a whole. And I think that's where the party is now. So because of that, and I think it will also happen to the APC because it was formed and it went into government by 2015. So it's going to, anytime they lose power, they will have this crisis of sub-units that have no strength, that have no capacity on their own to go and look for members, that have waiting for Abuja to send money for election. So they will just sit down and wait. And once there is no charismatic figure who takes it over and tries to run it, support, it will go into the kind of moral and visionless crisis that PDP is in now. So the problem of Nigeria is now deepened by the absence of political parties to drive the changes. Yes. So that is a major challenge for Nigeria today. no political party to drive that future we're looking for.
Exactly. And it appears to me, reading your resignation letter from the PDP, that is kind of what you're looking to address with the Athena Centre. And because I don't see how we build this Nigeria or solve the problem with Nigeria or solve the leadership problem without dealing with the hardcore political issue. And I can see that some of the work that Athena Centre is doing, especially around elections and integrity of elections, is beginning to address those issues. If you could speak a little bit to how the work of the Athena Centre is looking to address this trouble with Nigeria. How do you understand the trouble, and what are you doing with the center to address it?
So, at the root of democracy is elections.
Yeah.
And at the root of elections is the integrity of that process. So once that process does not have integrity, then we will be electing leaders who have no incentive to deliver public goods because they don't need the people to win an election. They need elite consensus and ability to alter the results to remain in office. So there is a major challenge facing Nigeria today. And that challenge is that for us to say that liberal democracy has not done well in Africa, in Nigeria, we must first of all practice liberal democracy, which presupposes, proper elections. So if you look at an institution like INEC, it has become a very shameless organization. Shameless in its outcomes and even in its process. Nothing bothers INEC that there are 500 cases after an election that went to court. INEC does not even set for itself a goal that says, every election we will want to see less number of people going to court by virtue of the integrity of the election. 2015, by President Jonathan not challenging that election in court, the number of cases that went to court that year went down, plummeted in Nigeria. So everybody in Nigeria realized and said, well, the election was fairly well done. But 2019 was less than 2015, and 2023 is worse than 2019. And now we're getting to the state elections that are growing progressively worse, the last being Edo. So it is because of the distributional nature of our state character. If we were a development state, INEC should be the institution that will be saying what I'm saying. Their audit immediately after every election will review weaknesses, will review what they did wrong, what their staff did wrong, sanction those who did it wrong, and then say, next election, we're hoping to see better outcomes. So I have shown examples. In Mexico, which is a country like Nigeria, the Wednesday after the election, appointed third parties will take a statistically significant number of polling units and cross-check the voting, manually recount the voting, check what was entered in the result before they can attest finally to the final results. So it is not a matter of go to court. There is no court. Court is when there are legal issues, not when there is election issues. So when an election is over, the opponent says, no, they didn't count my votes well, they didn't do this. INEC should be able to say, we have 7 days of an administrative process. So all the EC8A, all the EC8B, we're uploading it online. If you have any issues with them, bring it out. I told the story of going to Kogi to conduct a primaries. And one of the people in that primaries was Senator Dino. He was my friend at that time, still my friend. But the way we ran the primaries, he lost to TJ Yusuf. And we were in school, we were in neighbors in law school, we sat next to each other. If I had done anything against him, or if he didn't think the process was clean, of course, I don't think we would be speaking to each other. So INEC as an institution is shameless. Because where they are today is for them to say, no. In Edo, we saw that this doesn't match with this, so we're reviewing it. This is our final result after the review. They shouldn't say, oh, the law stops us from going to where it's now the court to decide. The court has no such time to determine those issues.
Okay, and because elections are at the heart of any discussions around fixing Nigeria or fixing the leadership issues, etc., what have you at Athena Centre found to be the core ways that elections are rigged in Nigeria? And what can we practically, pragmatic here, not theory, do to fix those problems?
Thank you. This is a very important point. Very, very important point. Now, I have recommended 3 simple things to be done.
What are the problems first? How are elections?
The problem is that results are altered by electoral presiding officers at the point of entering what happened in the polling units. Some electoral officers, presiding officers, are bold enough to enter what did not happen. So they will, after they've counted 20 votes, 3 for Patrick Party, 2 for Osita Party, 5 for Musa Party, they will now go and register 200 votes. They will write 20 first. When they go out, they will add another 0, and then come to everybody's side and then add 0 zeros on it, or add 1 before it, and then determine a new result. So that's criminality in the face of it. But INEC's process of snapping the result and uploading has helped tremendously. If you go to any election, 70% of the electoral officers upload the correct results. Only about 25% to 30%, 22% in some places, 23% that alter the result. Unfortunately, those 23%, their altering normally damages the whole result. So first of all is the parties must have strong agents, and the citizens must hold the INEC officials responsible at their polling units, enter the correct result, snap it, upload. All of us will take our own snapshots and we go. So at the polling unit, it's easy to compel them to do that which is right. Now, what we also is that because governors or people come from a particular area, people in their area are willing to allow the results to be changed to favor their own. So that can be an issue. So what then happens is that after that election process uploaded, then we get to the ward collation. At the ward collation, the officers there again alter the results to favor the candidates that INEC is working for. So it is at the ward collation that the more egregious acts of subversion happens. So sometimes results are fully rewritten. Some are cancelled to reduce the opponent's vote. Some votes of the opponents are reduced, and one of the favored candidate votes are added to him. So the reason is that INEC does not upload the EC8B. So nobody has visibility. From that point on, we enter a dark hole. We don't have visibility again on what happens at the ward, the local government, until we hear the final results. So we think that the people at the ward, that is the place that we should do what we have been canvassing for, which is an audit. The electoral officer comes back with the votes. He comes back with the papers, used, unused ballots, EC8A field, and the beavers. So the electoral officer, the collation officer, is required to look at the beavers and confirm the number of people that were accredited. He is required to look at the EC8A and then enter the results in the EC8B. If he sees any anomalies, he's also empowered to cancel that result and say, this result has been altered. The accredited is more than what is on the beavers. So it is at that point I am saying that we should buy 8,800 scanning machines so that when the results are brought there, the ballot papers are scanned. It will confirm fingerprints. It will confirm valid fingerprints without revealing the person who voted. And we are going to then enter the results as from the EC8A. And they will upload it. So when you finish every ward, you upload the EC8A. Now, before we get to that ward collation, INEC used to allow the beavers accreditation numbers to be on their website. At the Edo election was the first time they removed it from their website. We no more see how many people are accredited by beavers. That kept many electoral officers in check because the public have already seen how many people are accredited. INEC miraculously and very egregiously removed it from public view. So we need to restore that to public view. After the collation at the ward, I don't think we should do any further collation. That result should be entered into the electronic system. That will just populate it. Yes, so we can sit down, everybody can call the result. If you're a senatorial candidate, it will aggregate the local governments under you and announce the results. If you are a senatorial House of Rep candidate, if you are president, it will aggregate and announce the state results. So we will remove 2 levels of collation and go straight that the polling unit result is only thing that matters. Once it is verified, so even if it takes them 2 days to verify it, everybody will be patient. In India, elections last 8 months.
Technology, yeah?
Yes, election lasts 8 months in India because the same equipment is what they move from one zone to the other. So they couldn't have bought 800 million people vote in the elections. So when they finish here, they move it to the next place. So the election is just going on. Results are being tabulated. Immediately you finish the electronic voting, third-party auditors just sit to confirm that what was entered and the EVM are the same. So they do that together with the voting so that when the result is announced, then that's final. So now, that for me is the 3 simple steps to take now. 1, keep the visibility of the EC8A, put the visibility of the BVAS online. How many people, even at the end of the election, once it synchronizes fully with the back end, INEC should upload the numbers from each BVAS. With the number of the BVAS, electronic number of the BVAS, the number of votes is accredited, upload it together with the ward result. At the same time, upload the EC8B of the ward collation after it's done. Allow for the ward collation to be the center for authentication of results and for third-party review. So NGOs, churches, mosques, everybody can be, you can select people in every ward to be present and to certify that what was done transparently, and these are the results of the election. And allow the scanning to allow people who question the results to be able to allow access. Look at the ballots, go and verify if there's any issue, come back to us. But INEC should be the first body to make sure the elections are proper, not the courts.
Just to push this one more time, an idea for you and tell me whether it's feasible or not. In one of your Athena Centre reports, you mentioned names of, electoral officers who falsified with evidence, who falsified the election, right? Shouldn't we be doing a divide and conquer here? Let's say that, INEC, probably working for some lord and master, difficult to reach them. Shouldn't we pick out some of these individuals who probably collected little monies or whatever to commit a crime? Shouldn't we isolate them, take them to court, and prosecute and put them in jail as a form of deterrent for any other person who's invited to act as an electoral officer? Wouldn't that weaken that structure? And why hasn't it happened?
So that's the first question. Why hasn't that happened? Because the prosecutor is a federal offense. Only the Attorney General of the Federation can prosecute them. So if he's in the ruling party, he will never prosecute them. And only INEC is supposed to bring the charges. So if INEC does not bring the charges that there are people falsified results, then you have no crime. So again, it is the amending of our laws to ensure that, political parties and candidates in an election can take civil action against electoral officers who falsify results. So if it's not a criminal action this time, but you go and said, I could have won this election if not for what Patrick did. So I'm, charging Patrick for breach of trust, for not performing a duty of care in managing the result, and I am claiming damages. Okay. So the person becomes personally liable for the damages, and I think our laws need to be amended to include civil action.
Now, again, I'm really focusing on the practical here, right? Yes. You've been in government for, I almost said forever, but you've been in government for a long time, post your private sector work. You understand the inner workings of the executive. You also understand the inner workings of the legislature for, various reasons, and also the judiciary. How do we navigate this? So we've seen now that if we can change this law from a federal offense to a state offense or whatever else, it gives us the opportunity for NGOs, civil society organizations to engage these individuals, not the institution now, but the individuals. And we can create that narrow corridor, right? Where government knows that there are people watching and we can have that contestation. How do we navigate that? Why would the National Assembly pass such a law if they are direct beneficiaries of this system that is broken? How do we change the incentive system to get them to do it within this assembly?
So, you see, the problem in Nigeria when it comes to electoral reforms have not been the legislature. Actually, our legislators have done so well every time in writing laws. Then our judiciary will suddenly now, find a loophole and escape from the law. So if we propose, as I'm proposing to them, and I'm engaging the National Assembly, to say, you all are politicians. So criminal offenses require you to get a fiat from the Attorney General. It requires the Attorney General to prosecute, or we can mandate INEC to prosecute. But if INEC is working in tandem with their agents, they will not prosecute. So why don't we create a civil option? We can take a civil suit against them and say these people conspired, damage the process. So we can get fines. And if the judiciary is serious, they will impose very strong fines against them so that the people will know that, it's costly to go and tamper with election results. So I think we can build that coalition. I've been proposing that we build, one of the challenges in Nigeria today is the despair and the feeling of people that nothing can be done.
Exactly.
And that feeling is a very dark one. So I have come up with the idea that we need to build a coalition of hope. A coalition of hope of those who think that Nigeria can still work. I don't think there is anything wrong with Nigeria as constituted. I just think that we have a software code that needs to be recoded. It is designed, the design is a problem. It is designed as a distributional state. It's not designed as a developmental state. So if we can redesign, and it doesn't have to happen in one go. It doesn't have to happen in one go. That's why I'm going to read the tax bill carefully before commenting on it. And then
but you have to comment, even if you haven't read it, because that's a question I have. Because I think we're seeing that, redevelopment of that software code, with the tax bill. That President Tinubu has really taken on the key elephant in the room, to say that the way we collect our resources as a people and distribute it could be the reason why we are unproductive. We should go back to getting people to eat what they kill. And if you can't kill it, then unfortunately you will die. And if you don't want to die, then you do something to fix it. So although you haven't read it, I need you to comment on the philosophy of it.
So that's what I'm saying. I cited it as an example of the possibility of realigning the code. And we may not achieve it in one go. I think nations are work in progress. It's a case of push and pull to keep inching towards the success. What I haven't seen is the philosophical redefinition. You see, when this president changed the national anthem, I've been in the vanguard of the call for the old national anthem. I've always believed we should go back to it. So when he went back to it, everybody was happy. I was happy, but I was sad. Because I didn't think it should be smuggled back into Nigeria through the National Assembly. I thought it should have been the subject of a robust national debate. So that when we say those words, it will have meaning to us. When we say to build a nation where no man is oppressed, it will be a mantra for the new Nigeria. I thought he would have given us the opportunity to canvass why we want to build a nation that we will keep a banner without stain and hand it over to the next generation. When we say that though tribes and tongues may differ, in brotherhood we stand, it will have meaning. Just singing it will not create it. It will have been a question of saying, let's rethink ourselves. This is a diverse Black nation, a home for all, a nation where we give opportunities for everybody to grow. That is why I have cited the example somewhere that a governor can go and pay $700,000 to an American international school for his children to go to the school over the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't see that the joke was on him, that you finished running a state and you couldn't build a school that your children could go to. So, and the fact that you could pay an international school in the country, let's even say you don't want to build it in Kogi, why didn't you build a school in Abuja where your children can go to? So, and I just opposed him as a governor, Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi, with a businessman in Anambra called Ernest Azudialo, who is the founder of Nextier, who went to Okija, his village, and built a Jesuit Loyola college called Gonzaga. This is his private money. But he thought that the children of Okija needed to be given an opportunity to get to where he is. He decided that of all the efforts he has made, one of the things that can uplift the people of Okija is to give them quality education. And this has not only given Okija, it has now attracted children from a diverse background from around the country to come to Gonzaga in Okija. He didn't stop there. He built a pediatric hospital built by Julius Berger in Okija. This is a private individual. Now, a governor, on the other hand, because of the distributional nature of Nigeria, decided that what was good for his children was not good for the children of Kogi.
Mm.
He decided that his children should go to an American international school, while the children of Kogi languish in schools without roof, without chairs. So this is the kind of things that when you see, you now see that there is need for philosophical reset and for design, for redesigning. So the tax bill, when I read it, we're going to come out as a center to comment on the tax bill, but we fundamentally agree that Nigeria's source codes need to be rejigged. And if we rejig it, it will go a long way in helping us to begin to realize our potential.
Exactly. And in a few minutes, we'll open it up for audience participation. I urge you to please type your questions in the Q&A tab. I will read them out, but I'll give full attribution, to whomever put the questions there. But before we get to that, Ikobosi, the title of this our talk is The Trouble with Nigeria and What We Can Do About It. Can you crystallize for me in bullet points, in your view, what are these core troubles or problems we have in Nigeria? And what are the elements of the solution? Obviously, the elements can be arranged in whatever form, but what are the elements that must be in place for us to begin to fix Nigeria?
So, number one is that I've said it. There's a design problem. Mm-hmm. A design problem in Nigeria that we need to fix. We need to fix the design problem. And the reason why I keep talking about this design problem is that a state that is designed as a distributional state will not have the institutions to become a development state. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, the governor is thinking of what will be good for his children. And he's not thinking about how that will save the children of Kogi. Because like I said, he's in a distributional state. So we need to figure out how to redesign Nigeria. And in redesigning Nigeria, we have to understand that nothing is wrong with Nigeria. Nigeria is not an exceptional state. Nigeria is working. I want to tell the young people every time, the country is working. And I'll give you an example. You go to University of Nigeria in Nsukka, the hostels are overcrowded. The school is dirty. The generator is not working. There's no running water in it. Students go to school every day and study medicine. Their school fees is 150,000 naira a year. That's about less than $100, $80 a year. Then they finish. Maybe you give the child 100,000 every month. So by the time he finishes 1 year of 9 months, he has spent 900,000, 1 million, which is less than $600, about $600, $700 a month, a year. Then he does it for 6 years. We're talking about $3,000+ for 6 years to educate him through Nsukka medicine.
Swap it up to $5,000.
He finishes from Nsukka with $5,000. He writes the board exam in California. And then he becomes a certified board-certified doctor in California. To train an American in the medical school is minimum of $300,000 US for the low-end schools, $700,000 for the high-end schools. And yet, the Nigerian doctors are sought after across Nigeria, the Western world, whether in the UK or in the US. So what do we need to do? Any sensible country will be thinking about how do we improve our capacity to keep building manpower? Because this is something that we have capacity to do. Nigerians are complaining. Nigerian computer engineers, a Nigerian company called MoneyPoint just got $1 billion valuation a month ago. 50% of the Western funds that come into Africa end up in Nigerian companies looking for. So if the Americans are here looking for returns in investing in early stage companies in Nigeria, please don't tell me Nigeria is not working. Don't tell me that. So what needs to work is that the redesign of Nigeria, the expansion of our market capacity, the ability to move our politics from a distributional politics to a development politics by first making our elections credible and allowing the people to determine their leadership. Part of that design challenge for me is that we must do away with second term in office in Nigeria till we calm down. Let people stop using public finances in the office to get themselves a second term. So we need to figure out and give ourselves a transition period. It's work in progress. We can do it. So that our leaders can come and focus on development. Don't use our 4 years to build things that will give you a second term that have no value to the state. We don't have such time. Since the democracy started in 1999, we've had 25 years now. And the children that were born there have left university.
Okay, Ikobosi,
Yes.
Didn't Jonathan propose this? You know, Jonathan proposed a single term 6 years, but it did not fly. Why didn't it fly, and what's going to be different this time?
Why it didn't fly is because everybody suspected that Jonathan wanted to use it to extend his own stay. So first of all, the president that will push it has to say, you know, I'm on my second term, for instance, so I'm not eligible to run again. So I'm not running again. So we need to do this because we just need to get a broad elite consensus. When we define the meaning of Nigeria, then our institutional design will be to begin to make it possible for Nigeria to thrive. We need to begin to make it possible for Nigeria to thrive. And part of the ways to make it to thrive is that the institutions will reflect our national hopes and aspirations. So when we say we want an educational system that will produce 1 million people over the next 10 years that have this type of skills, then every state can key in into that vision. Every private and public universities can key in. When we say that we want a situation where our production of oil, our national resources, will come not anymore from just selling oil, but from our capacity to, not just from selling oil, but from our capacity to produce and export. Let me ask you, if you think about cocoa now, we're exporting cocoa in Nigeria, and part of what we export in that cocoa is the fact that our export of cocoa is done by people selling at the farm gate to people who buy the beans and export. Now, if you go beyond those, think about a state now deciding, I'm going to pay the price of the beans at the gate. I'm going to find myself $1 million every year, buy up all the beans that is coming from Ondo, and process it and build a processing factory, or find 3 or 4 private sector processors and said, we will process this and we're going to let it to, this now to be exported as Ondo State joint venture with a private sector company. So when we export the cocoa, we can make about $4 million from cocoa butter and powder. So the state of Ondo State is earning $4 million. Out of the 1.5 million they have invested in buying cocoa, another 800,000 in processing, or 1 million. So there's a profit already of about $2 million. Just using those numbers to give an example. Why are we allowing our farmers sell it at the farm gates? You know, instead of thinking as a development state, how to make that thing to be something everybody will look at your phone. How to make it what everybody can look at, how to make it something that everybody can see the value that the Nigerian state can provide. So palm oil, for instance, is scarce in Nigeria. We import palm oil in Nigeria. So the Southeast states have no business not buying up all the palm that is there, processing it, and becoming the major sellers of palm oil with private sector companies. So this is a mixture of the marketing board and private sector ingenuity, but with the state putting in some capital. So the idea I'm proposing is that what Chinese people have done, taking what works and making it, cascading it from the local levels to the higher level. In China, there's a top-down system, but there's a bottom-up system, forcing every locality to find what they can do to attract people to their locality. Because the reward system is the more you produce, the more you get.
Exactly.
But we have a perverse reverse, reward system now.
In fact, because you've gone there, let me move to the questions from our participants. And I have a question from our friend Jerome Okolo. And he says, Ojo Madekwe, who's your, was your boss and mentor,
yes.
that when it becomes advantageous for politicians for there to be free and fair elections, the elections would become free and fair. Jerome's question is why, when, and under what conditions would it become advantageous for the ruling party and elite to bring about the multitude of changes to the electoral law and practice, which you have proposed so thoughtfully and in such detail?
So go back to 2000, go back to 2007. President Umaru Yar'Adua was elected in an election that was widely considered not free nor fair. He came to Eagle Square and said, the election that brought me to power was not a credible election. What did he do next? He set up the Justice Uwais Commission that brought wide-ranging proposals. While it was being done, he died. President Jonathan took over from him and went and took a member of the Justice Uwais Commission, Atahiru Jega, and made him INEC chairman, and introduced all the technological systems that made it that PDP lost an election. Now, how APC have behaved since they got that power, including Saint Buhari, who was a tragic ruler for Nigeria, how they have behaved, have removed incentive for any politician to want to do any such thing. Now, instead of Nigerians praising Jonathan for building the system, what Nigerians are now saying, he's not a man. He should have doubled down. Can't you see how the people in Rivers rewrote the results? Can't you see how the people in this place rewrote the results? So now being good has not been incentivized by Nigerians. Conducting an election that you lost is now seen an act of being a sissy and of not being a strong man. So what is at stake today is that there is no mass, what I call consensus to push for the politicians to give what they currently do not have. So if I were to propose, Ojo is right in saying when it becomes advantageous. What we should be talking about is how to force the politicians for it to become advantageous. So President Yar'Adua did it from the top. And I can see that the masses haven't even responded nor recognized that even the beavers we are talking about today is a product of Umaru Yar'Adua's insistence that we reform our electoral process. So what needs to happen now is to build this coalition of hope with a single agenda to bring back our elections. Single agenda of a coalition of hope. And I'm hoping that I will find like minds to come together. Let's push this one agenda. He said, in our third answer of our national anthem, he said, "Oh God of creation, grant this our one request." Just one request. Help us to build a nation. So I'm asking Nigerians, let's not think about the economy. Let's not think about state creation. Let's not think about our divide. Let's think about, oh God of creation, grant this our one request. Help us to credible elections.
Because you've gone there and because of what you said earlier on, a friend of mine reached out when they saw the flyer that I'm going to be talking to you, and they said, why are you talking to Ikobo? See, after all, he's the one that convinced Jonathan to hand over to Buhari when every other voice in the room said he should hold on. I reminded him that it was the right thing to do because there would have been bloodshed, right? But because you've raised this idea of a coalition, I have a question here from Eze. Very deep thoughts, Ikobosi, and indeed Patrick for asking thoughtful questions. My question, we see how those ruining Nigeria are united, while those who want to push Nigeria forward are focused on individual efforts. When will the likes of Athena Centre, Fix Politics, SPPG, etc., come together in a credible collective action? What are the issues preventing patriots from coming together and have that elite consensus that we have all been talking about? That's a direct question.
I always tell people, first things first. Everything has to come in tandem. The Black Lives Matter movement was not made up of Brookings Institute or Heritage or other left-wing think tanks. So there is a role for everybody in this. There is the role of the thinking. That thinking that makes it possible for people to understand what the issues are. That thinking that creates the evidence for action to be taken. If Athena has been planning to form a coalition first, we won't have time to double down in our office. It takes us roughly 4 weeks of writing INEC, receiving the report. We have 60 people entering the results every day there's an election. Immediately the election results start going onto the IREV. We built a proprietary software where all the results are entered, and it begins to flag the anomalies for us before we even wait to get INEC's own EC8B. INEC's own, when we collect INEC's data on BVAS, EC8B, C, and D, we then sit down and manually enter it again into the system. And then we begin to crunch the numbers. We begin to press it. And without it, Nigerians will not have known who is the name of the person who changed the results, who did this and who did that. So I believe very firmly that those that told you Okigbo III convinced Jonathan to hand over are the problem with Nigeria. They are part of the trouble with Nigeria. They are the people that are saying that the man of muscle is the one that will work. So that is why, if you look at today, the men of muscle have won. You finish running a state, you confiscate the state, you take the resources, and you bid for power. And people say he is a good politician. These are the guys. They are fearless. They are capable. You loot a state for 4 years, 8 years. Your parents have never been known to be rich. You have never been known to do any other work. And Nigerians will say, he has the resources. Why didn't you people make peace with him? Didn't you see that he has the resources? Resources from where?
Are you talking about anyone in particular?
Of all the bad people who are moving around. So we need a coalition of hope who says to people, let's come together. And this is what I believe in. Thought precedes action. So we are providing the thought. So it may happen that all of us will individually move now and form that movement that begins to campaign strategically for certain reforms and saying, this is what we want done. And we're hoping that it will happen.
So I've scanned through this and I see the questions around leadership recruitment. There's one from Chinenye Nwogo. What do you really think is the greatest challenge with credible leadership recruitment, which I feel is the major issue with Nigeria? And there's another question related from Victor Mac Onyebu. The root causes for me are the leadership recruitment system and the integrity of the electoral process. How do you solve the challenge of the recruitment process where parties are literally hijacked by money bags and delegates are bribed to select a candidate? Is Athena also thinking about this?
So somebody just asked me yesterday, I think it was Charles on Arise TV. Charles asked me yesterday, he said, when are you going to throw this search beam on the primaries of the political parties?
Exactly.
To see the credibility of the primaries. And I didn't answer him well because we ran out of time, but I'm going to say this. It doesn't really matter how parties produce their candidates, because political parties are in the business of winning power. They may decide that they will appoint their candidates. You can't stop them from doing that. They may decide they will elect an insurrectionist or a felon to be their candidate. You can't stop them. So what is at stake is that if the electorates, and I'm going to warn people about this, even if our elections are credible and the elections are free and fair, it doesn't mean we are going to elect the right people. Because Nigerians can gather on election day and elect a reformed criminal. We have elected a reform Democrat before, supported by credible thinking Nigerians. A man known to have brought down a civilian government was now elected as a reform Democrat. So we can find the reform thieves being elected. So it doesn't follow that credible elections mean that good people will be elected. It still means that the rule of democracy means that this education we're doing, these conversations we're having, this development discourse is designed to bring people to understand the issues. I mean, it is interesting to see how powerful that podcasts have become in America, that both Kamala and Trump ended up attending podcasts more than they interviewed with mainstream television stations. That Joe Rogan had more influence on the election than even Fox TV.
And Kamala is blamed for losing the election because she didn't go to Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yes. I mean, so you can see how powerful. So when people see us doing this, that's why I support this program. I share this development discourse, because it is the spread of this thought, the education of the mind, that will ensure that even in a free and fair election, in a credible election, that we do not go end up electing thugs. Because people can just finish and say, it doesn't matter. I can tell you, Buhari got substantial votes in northern Nigeria, and I don't even think they are rigged. I think the majority of Nigerian northerners believed that Buhari was the solution to Nigerians' problem.
Not just northerners.
I'm talking of 2019 election, not 2015, 2019.
Yes, okay.
By 2015, the whole of the country believed it. They reformed Democrats. So there were many Southerners again and many elite people who didn't vote again for him in 2019. But in 2019, he amassed 11 million votes from the area we call Northern Nigeria. So when you look at elections, the credibility of the election allows the views of the majority, like has happened in America, to prevail. It allows the views of the majority, like happened in Brazil, where Bolsonaro won. So how to now remove those demagogues from power requires a strong coalition from the people who think otherwise. Without a strong coalition, they will likely not remove an incumbent whose views, no matter how bad they are benefiting some people and impacting some people positively.
So many questions to get through, so we'll see if we can make it a bit faster. There was always this question on values reorientation, on maybe educating Nigerians to have a view on what Nigeria should be, etc. Where do you fall on that? Is there any nation that develops without having these values orientation? Is it a prerequisite to national development?
So I go back to my fundamental thesis, that once we haven't defined the purpose and meaning of Nigeria, we can't have national values. We can't start buying fuel for a car that we haven't bought. Let's buy the car first, and then we can buy fuel. I believe that our national values will flow from the meaning and purpose of Nigeria. What are we a state for? And I don't think that people who ask that question, I think, are talking about dismembering Nigeria. I think the issue is that the nature of Nigerian states now, the low quality, the inability to deliver positive outcomes in many areas is now beginning to force us to go back to our original design system. Because the British designed Nigeria as a convenience shop. The railway they built is from Maiduguri to Port Harcourt, Lagos to Kano to Lagos, just to extract resources, take it to the sea and export. They didn't think about moving people from the east to the west. They didn't think about diagonally crossing the country because there were no resources to move those ways. They thought about natural resources, all the agricultural products, all the cuttings. They used rail and put it. So the British bureaucratic sophistication was applied to an extractive state, and it successfully extracted resources. Somebody has pointed out the various nature of colonialism in Africa, from the places where they went and allocated the land to themselves in Kenya, in South Africa, became owners, to places where they saw as hardship posts, where the malaria and the mosquito made it a place inhospitable for them. So they focused on extracting resources. Now, unfortunately, the people that inherited the British colonial system continued the extraction without the efficiency of the British bureaucracy and without the vision. The British bureaucracy did it for Her Majesty's treasury. But in Nigeria, we now did it for our private pockets.
Sure.
So I think
let me
that
get a few more. Ikobo, so many questions here. Let me get all of them brilliant questions. So let me see if I can get a lot more of them in. There's a Damilola Oyewusi. He says, how can we make this coalition of hope happen? Give us your first 3 steps and possible timeline.
So my first step is that we're going to call on many groups and people across Nigeria to join on this one simple issue. I believe we can build consensus across Nigeria, which is first, electoral reforms, the integrity of our elections. I believe that we should go from the non-contentious issues then to the more contentious issues. So our first step, like the civil rights movement was designed to bring civil rights to Blacks in America. When that goal was achieved, of course, the movement went into oblivion. The Black Lives Matter has come and is pushing across the world. We've seen movements arise. Sometimes their objective is not fully achieved, but they alter the character of the state. In Israel, we saw a movement saying to Netanyahu, you can't take away the power of the Supreme Court. So we are going to identify a single issue that unites us, and we push for it. Now, when I'm thinking that 2025 is a good year to start that, to begin to push that both the legislative action, the executive actions are taken to make sure that the 2027 election is an election that reflects the votes of Nigerians. So if we decide to re-elect the incumbent president, so be it. If we decide to elect any other person to power, so be it. Our agreement will be, this is the choice of majority of Nigerians. And I also believe that in those electoral reforms, and because of the nature of Nigeria, nobody should be president without 51% of the votes. So if nobody makes 51%, we go for a rerun. And then for the 2 people, so that 1 person can emerge with the majority of votes of Nigerians. We need to legitimize government once again. We need to make government to be legitimate. This cloud of illegitimacy that drives our government in Nigeria makes them almost act criminal because they don't seem to think that they have enough to push for reforms. So we think that when you have that kind of mandate, then you can push your reforms and you are sure that 51% of Nigerians are behind you.
We wait to see more and read more about this coalition of hope. But I have a question from Magnus Adiele. The Nigerian reality is very complicated. When you say that the Nigerian problem is primarily a design problem, what is that design? But I think you kind of answered that question. The question I think you should pay attention to is who is going to design it and how can it be redesigned?
So before now, I've always argued that the post-Civil War generation has a mission to redesign Nigeria. We don't have the hang-ups, neither do we have the burden of the past. We grew up attending federal government colleges across Nigeria. We rode on the trains that drove from Enugu to Kaura and Amoda. Students went to Federal Government College, Sokoto, Federal Government College, Maiduguri. People went to government colleges in different places in Nigeria. And that generation is about to turn 60. The first set of them, those born in 1960, have turned 60. They've retired. I believe that those of us born after the war, the first set was pre-war children, but the independence children have retired and they haven't done much to Nigeria. The mission of the post-Civil War, those born between 1970 and all the way down to 1980, is to redesign Nigeria, to create incentives for development, to join the coalition of hope, to restore integrity to our elections, and to think of the purpose and meaning of Nigeria so that we are all working, all our institutions are working to realize our manifest destiny as a nation.
Okay, so I have the same question from Umaru Dare Baba and from Bernard Obima. You have presented great ideas. What are your thoughts on the impact of regionalism, tribalism, and religion in our politics, especially when politicians have used these factors to get into power, and what's the way forward? Bernard Obima then takes a different spin to it to say, in the Southeast, do you agree with those who argue that we should abandon the national project and politics and concentrate on developing the states. So it's kind of related, but if you can take both of them together.
So until any region successfully instills the ideals of merit, liberty, freedom in their state and become a development organization. And I will say this, it will be controversial. Lagos State is the only state that has tried to become a development state in Nigeria. And not only did he become a development state, he built a broad elite consensus that have allowed seamless transfer of power from people you will identify as no pushovers. Fashola ended up being the Minister of Works, Housing and Power in Nigeria. His outcomes are questionable. You can debate it, but he has left the position and he's freely walking around Nigeria, still delivering speeches and talking freely. Most people who went on to become ministers such powerful end up in EFCC. Ambode did that in Lagos, tough guy, went through the public service. And then we have now Sanwo-Olu in Lagos. So you could see that there is a deliberate design to continue to offer imaginative and strong leadership in Lagos. So I want to see that region in Nigeria that has taken a development approach, since no region has taken it. And I want to believe that our regions were heading towards crisis in 1960 to 66. I keep saying this and I hope people will hear me. In 1965, the whole of the Eastern region, 1964 election, boycotted the election. The East did not participate in the election. And the MPC still got enough seats to form government. It took Zik 5 days to call Tafawa Balewa to form a government. And part of what Tafawa Balewa promised was that there will be constitutional reforms to change the character and the structure of the state. That was why the East agreed to now do their own election in March of 1965. So Nigerian issues have never been, is this design problem? Nigerian issues have always been there. There was no time it was glorious and that there were no issues. No, our political crisis, the minorities were fighting in the Middle Belt, the thief crisis. The core states, Cross River, Gojari rivers were fighting for independence in the East. The Midwest was agitating for independence. So I'm saying that no region has shown me that they have the capacity to think, especially monolithic region like the Southeast. So there is no way we can look upon Nigeria and say to Nigeria, we are better than you. Yeah, we are doing well in education and co, but nothing in our system have shown that we are the best region where people can live, that people will migrate from other places and say, I'm going to live in the East because it's a thriving place. The people recognize merit. They have days for recruitment of civil servants. You can see their civil service academy. You can see the academy is like the Singapore Public Service Academy. You can see the quality of people. You can see the systems that they put in place to run their area. There is digitized land tenure system. So if you get a C of O in the East, you can take it to any bank. So we need to show that there is something any region has done very well that will warrant us to keep arguing about regionalism. Now, for those who say that, yes, I'm one of those who agree that Nigerian states can actually come together at their subnational level and give Nigeria examples. So when you talk about the nation, what they call it in America, the health insurance for all, it was actually started by the state of Massachusetts.
Okay.
Before it was Massachusetts, under, I think it was Romney or before Romney, that forced everybody to have an insurance. That is what Obama cascaded as the Obamacare. So America's strength is in its 50 states laboratory. So people try things in the state. When it works, the federal government kind of takes it over and spreads it. So Nigeria have 36 states to show examples. The unfortunate thing is that each governor has struggled to bring somebody that they're bigger than so they can control the person, and each state has been going down one step after the other. But we're hoping that one or two states can rise to show that example that the nation can copy.
I have a question that should be a natural follow-on to your last comment, but let me go to a different question before I come back to that. There is an anonymous attendee that says, another trouble with Nigeria is lack of patriotism on the part of the leaders and the led. What practical ways can we use to reignite the spirit of patriotism that reminds us we are all stakeholders responsible for the smooth sailing of the ship called Nigeria?
And there's no such drug to take and become patriotic. Patriotism is not a disease that you can, or a vitamin that you can inject in people. Again, it is about our national consensus.
No, but
So
there's some practical things, Ikobosi.
yes, tell
Come
me.
on, for instance, set up the unity schools to solve a particular problem, right? To
Yes.
bring people together. There's
Yeah.
some practical ideas that we can use in getting people to become more patriotic.
So that's what I'm saying. The federal government colleges then disoriented again because it now became an avenue for the elites to move their children to federal government colleges. Permanent secretaries, directors in the civil service now started having slot to bring people. After a while, that failed woefully. The National Youth Service was designed, that, in fact, 1970s was our greatest effort as social engineering to provide national unity and to promote patriotism. But what is happening is that so long as a state is of an extractive nature, of a distributional nature, when the people that finish going to all those things will go back to their states and argue that it is the turn of their own people to produce the chief engineer in the ministry. Every time they produce chief engineer, it has always been from the other side of the state. So it is our turn now to do it. Why are people who went to National Youth Service coming back again to still plead those things? Why didn't they settle in the state where they did youth service and rise to become permanent secretaries? Because of the distributional nature of the Nigerian state. So I'm saying that the practical steps that can be taken is to fundamentally just have that agreement on what is the purpose of Nigeria. So if our purpose is to build the greatest Black nation, to create opportunity for our best and the brightest, to create an opportunity for justice, equity, not unity and freedom and faith, to create that minimum quality, a nation where no man is oppressed, then we can then now begin to design our institutions to know that every Nigerian will say, for the money I got from look at what I told you about University of Nigeria at 100,000. That is a huge subsidy from the Nigerian state. But the Nigerian state has never said to anybody, the cost of us training you by the allocations we pay is actually 7 million naira, but you paid only 1.2 million. Nigerian states have never shown that there is benefit to being Nigerian. Because if you go to Ahmadu Bello and graduate from there, man, you collected, even compared with Bayes University. I went to study law in Bayes. I was paying 2.5 million a year. In my time, I paid 10 million to graduate from law school, from Bayes University. Now it's 3.5 million, 4 million now in a year. And this same law is what they are doing in UNEC for 125,000. Just imagine, even if you use Bayes as a denominator, 10 million and 1 million for 1 year. This is the subsidy Nigerians are receiving from the Nigerian state. But the Nigerian state haven't been able to say this to Nigerians, articulate it, that despite our weakness, we have continued to deliver some value.
Ikobosi, I'm running out of time, but I must get to this question that really puts you on the spot. And it's from Chukwuebuka Obele. He has a two-part question. The first one is, how soon can we expect Athena Centre's input on the proposed tax bill? But the one that puts you on the spot is, he says, are you still interested in governing Anambra State, especially and considering that the perceived zoning favors Anambra Central, where you're from, to succeed Governor Soludo? So those are the two questions.
So the last question, Athena Centre will come up with his report. I'm not the only person in Athena Centre. So they're looking at it, and once we're ready, we'll make it public. We'll take our time just to be sure. We are not partisans, so we don't care what people will think. We'll just make our position known. So we will. Yes, I'm interested in ruling Anambra State. That's my answer.
But you left, your last statement said that you're leaving partisan politics. Isn't that a contradiction?
For now.
For now.
Yes. And hope that if we reform the electoral process and if we rebuild Nigeria, I will reconsider my position. But if Nigeria is as presently constituted and elections is as presently done, that you can go back and redo the beavers and you can rewrite the results, I will not bother.
I have a question here, maybe my last question, from Maureen Idozu. Do you plan to engage international development partners as part of this process? How do they account for their support to the electoral process, considering the overwhelming irregularities, controversies, and what do you think about situations of such altering results as demonstrated by INEC officials? So basically, are you going to work with international development partners, especially given seemingly poor track record of their support and the outcomes that we've seen?
Definitely, we would like to work with them, but I'm one of those who don't think much about international partners in terms of, I like them because you get the opportunity of getting a 100-country experience if you work with the World Bank. If you work with so many, they have experience from across the world. We can share knowledge. But I think that the dirty job and the lifting is a Nigerian work. Despite all their support, if we're not ready to coalesce and lift, we'll end up just having all those people who, at the end of the day, the international partners, they will leave Afghanistan, they will leave, and they will come back as do-gooders to give us aid. So I think it is our job primarily. But yes, we will enjoy their expertise and the funding if need be, but I think basically it's our work. Nigerians must come to the consensus that it is time to change course.
Exactly. Ikobosi, thank you so much for your time, and the insights and the great knowledge you've shared with us today. And to the listeners, just to say that we're coming up to my last development discourse for the year, and it's going to be in 2 weeks' time, December 18th, and it will be with Professor Peter Lewis, and it's the theme is on reinforcing the guardrails, institution building, and Africa's development. Same time in 2 weeks' time. And once again, thank you for always joining us. And I hope this has been a fruitful experience for you. Ikobosi, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And well done on the development discourse. Keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you much.